Okay, so I wanted to show getting started with Aspnet Core, a web API, and perhaps maybe even a web app to go along with it, and how to do that in Typescript. And I like to use React, and that can get to be a pretty confusing topic. There's so many different environments nowadays with Electron, Node WebKit. In a Node environment, the way that modules are loaded is just so differently than we'd load them in a web environment. So I plan to just show just a super simple app that uses both ways. So I just cd into the directory you want to be, and then call into the .NET CLI, say new web API is the type. Could be console, or there's quite a few templates. -o, and then the name. We'll just call it example. So that's going to stub out the app for us, and then I'm just going to cd into that and then open it up as a folder in code. It'll open a new instance. So here's our app. We should get a little pop-up down here pretty soon, asking if it wants us to add the resources, assets that it needs. You can see the bin folder popped up. That's from building this. There's C#, so it has to compile that and build all that. These are your assets. I think that maybe it was adding. So inside of here you can say .NET restore. If you add an asset, NuGet package, that'll restore them. .NET build will build the application. .NET run that'll start it all up on our local host. So it's currently running on these ports right here. Nothing fancy. Remember, it's a web API, so there's no landing page for it to go to. So we can see if it's working by going into that default values controller that the template provides us. So we're getting data in here. That's just in here, this simple values controller that it starts you out with in the project. So I think starting out with a better landing page, to where when we go to right here, we can see something, see a web app, right? And ultimately, you want your web app to get some data, right, from your web services, and you're just manipulating that. So I like to do the getting of the data on the client side, especially with React. Makes it real easy with the lifecycle hooks and stuff to just place an AJAX call directly into your web API, get your data, and go from there. I see that as quite a bit more efficient and easier to manage than having like an MVC site that has these controller methods, and those controller methods are calling into your APIs and getting the data, and it's sending the data to your web page, and then a lot of times you find a way to bind that data into JavaScript so that you can manipulate it in the client side, and it just seems like a much more complex scenario, right, than just plopping a simple HTML page with some JavaScript on it that says, hey, when it starts up, call the web API, get the data, and then go from there. So let me show you that. So I start by following the pattern www root. This is kind of anything public is going to go inside of here, public facing. So, and we'll just start with a index.html page. Nothing extravagant. I'm going to just put this in here before I forget. Div with an ID. Usually name it React root or something, right? Okay, so we got a page. Unfortunately, we can't really navigate to it yet. We got a little bit of ASP related setup that we got to do. If you come in here to the configure, this is where you're kind of configuring your app. This is where you're configuring services for your app, dependency injection, stuff like that, cores, you know. So we're going to come in here and say default files. So this will use the defaults for, you know, .html, .json, etc. And then something to do with static. Here we go, static files. So this will allow us to serve this file is sitting in our www root folder. And ultimately that's what we're wanting to do, right? So let's put some HTML in here so that we can see if we're on if we're doing good, if we got it loaded and stuff. So start with the header, maybe h1 says our web app. And then I'm just going to throw some content in there, right? So there's our HTML page. So if you notice, we're running right here, but we just changed the C# files, so we actually need to rebuild them before we can see it over here. If we refresh, still nothing's going to happen. So Control C will stop that process. And to prevent us from having to go in here and say .NET build and then .NET run again, you know, there's actually some default tasks that it stubbed out for us right here. Here's the build task, publish. This watch one is what we're interested in. There's also some launch tasks. If you wanted to, you could set breakpoints in here, you know, and then and use these launch tasks instead. And they'll hook up the debugger and all that sort of stuff for you. But I don't really think we need that. We're not really writing a lot of C# code right now. So Control P opens this command palette, task, and then we'll just run this watch task. I like to keep my terminal panels clean. So we're running in there. If we come back over here, there we go. You can see our web app. It's apparently smart enough to figure that out that we have this index.html and it's just sort of loading it. I actually expected that we'd have to go into this properties page right here and update this to say www root index.html, and then also add that right here. I expected we'd have to do that, but apparently it's kind of picked up on that for us. So we've got our web app right here. So the first thing to start integrating stuff, who doesn't start out with Bootstrap, right? So we'll grab some Bootstrap links and grab and put them up in here, just CDN links. So there's that. I like to grab this whole bundle. It's got the popper and all that other junk in there. So we got Bootstrap. You know what? Let's go and put, while we're here looking for libraries, right? Let's go grab jQuery. You always want to put jQuery in front of Bootstrap, right? And then let's see if that'll work. So we could say class.
So I'm looking for one.
Container, right? So if that works out, I think, yeah, that'll format that out a little bit for us. Class Jumbotron. Might work, right? There we go. Okay, so we got Bootstrap working. Next, let's add a React component. I do everything in TypeScript. You can do it differently if you wish. Just write regular JavaScript. So I guess we do need a yarn init, right? There's only a few things that we need to add here. I like to use npm to install Typescript. For some reason, yarn doesn't do the binding the commands right. It's got like a bunk PowerShell file that it runs, and it doesn't work properly. So, and then I do want to use React, so I'm just going to install some types for React and React DOM. And what else did we import? We imported jQuery and Bootstrap, right? So let's install those things. That's just going to throw these types in this @types folder right here in the node modules, and that allows us to write TypeScript and get some pretty great IntelliSense and stuff like that. So we can stub out our component here. Index equals you know what, let's just grab our stuff here, our HTML here, and maybe plop it down right here. So we do have to, we're going to have to change these to class name the React way. So, and then down here we're going to want to say React DOM render. We'll render out our index component. Document get element by ID. What do we name it? React root. I believe, yeah, React root. So this would technically just grab our React component here, and it'll render it into this div in our index.html page. So we do need to remember, so from our source, this stuff isn't really public. This www root is. So ultimately we need an index.js file chilling right here so that we can actually reference it down here, right? So / we'll say index.js like that. This isn't going to work. Obviously we don't have that file yet. We need to build it. Also, we need to go get React libraries. So we'll grab these guys. Let's do UMD. So when we do our, let's see, we haven't made a TypeScript config yet. Let's do that. ts config.json. We're going to need, let's do compile and save true. I'm just going to go grab this from another place and copy this, paste this in. I'll explain it. So that's self-explanatory. Our outdoor, we're wanting to put everything in this www root folder. We're targeting ES6. This allows us to use the JSX or TSX syntax. This is the module types that the TypeScript transpiler is going to produce in JavaScript module resolution node. This isn't necessary, I don't think, but it does spare you from some TypeScript errors that are just kind of annoying. And we're going to exclude anything from in here. We're providing our modules, right? The React through the CDN, stuff like that. So we don't really need it, I don't believe. So let's try to see what Control Shift B. We don't have any. We don't have a task in here to transpile our TypeScript. So let's add one of those real quick. You can find these tasks and stuff like this code for this everywhere on the internet. As a matter of fact, there is a way you can get VS Code to produce it for you. I don't know if it's from in here. Maybe it's F1 task and then configure default TypeScript task or something like that. Well, that'll end up doing it. But so now we've got our a task, and it's hooked up to Control Shift B because it's our default build task, right? So now we could type Control Shift B, and it'll execute this task. This task is going to use our TypeScript configuration, and it's going to run it. So here's our produced JavaScript file. So if you want to do the watch so that you don't have to run that task all the time, there's this default task right here that you can execute. And that'll watch on those. So now you get that Control S behavior where it'll produce this file every time you modify one of your TypeScript files. So that's looking a lot better now. I think it's looking like most things are in place for us to, let's see what we get when we're, okay, so we still have our UI. Notice it's not coming from here. Instead, I always like to make sure that these watch tasks are doing their job. There we go. So we're good to go here. If you don't like going back, I'm just using multiple desktops, but if you didn't like going back and forth like this, you technically, I think, could just say open preview here and do it inside of here. It's probably not, I don't know, it might work out just fine for you, I suppose. Okay, so now we got a React component, we got TypeScript going on in our project, and you could technically just start building all this stuff out. So the downsides of just using TypeScript this way and using all these CDNs, you know, is you're still having to modify and make sure all this stuff right here is up to par. And as you start adding all the sugar to it, you know, the SAS and stuff like that, it could get to be a nightmare referencing that sort of stuff. So it'll get us a ways, but as far as, you know, if you're building something and you've got in your source 20 different TypeScript files and you're importing them from here and there, it could be a nightmare. So that's where a different sort of setup could be more beneficial, using Webpack and Gulp and things like that to do the more technical bundle creations. As a matter of fact, I usually use a Webpack plugin that generates this HTML for me and adds all the script tags. And you can just install your modules with npm for React and Bootstrap and jQuery, stuff like that, where you don't need to provide any of these links and styles and stuff like that in here. Instead, you just simply import it right up here using a statement like this: import the React module. To import a SAS file even, right? you could just come in here and say /index.sass, and Webpack handles converting the Sass into TypeScript and including it when your component needs it. So it's doing all that stuff for you. So it allows you to concentrate and focus in here in this one file without having to concentrate on all these links and references and where's this at and that at. And using React is nice because you never have to write a line of jQuery. You can do everything in React. I feel like that traditionally we've had to use jQuery for. And once you figure out that all those magic strings going on in jQuery, you know, referencing this tag and that tag and the HTML page, which is in a different place, you know, you definitely will see the benefits of a jQuery-free project. So I still use jQuery for doing, you know, AJAX calls and stuff like that. But you don't really need it for doing your DOM manipulation. So I think we've got a values controller, right? So if we just said and created a React state, let's use TypeScript. So just type in the square brackets. We can strongly type this out to a string array. That way this is strongly typed everywhere we go to use it as well. You get the IntelliSense and stuff like that on it. So inside of here, if we wanted to, we could just create an array, right? And say 1, 2. We'd only want this to run on startup and not every time this render executes. So passing the empty array there, I'll make sure this only executes on startup. We'll populate this array, and let's say down here, let's say we wanted to reference that array, and we'll just do a simple JavaScript map to value, the index. And let's return a list item, shall we? I always do this index, I guess, to prevent this this key, so you don't see that red error inside of the console. So inside, we'll just write out the value. So that should have built for us. So if we refresh, okay, so we can see our items right here. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. We do have Bootstrap, right? So on values. Okay, so I'll just create a function up here. It's going to take E, I believe that's typed out as a React mouse event of HTML button element. Yeah. Okay, that's just so we get the IntelliSense and stuff like that on E when after you get everything, your syntax correct, I guess. So E dot all that IntelliSense. So what would we want to do? We'd probably want to add, let's say values equals values dot slice new values dot push. Let's push values length plus 1, right? Will that work? Oh well. This is expecting a string, right? Benefits of TypeScript. Okay, so let's just dump this in there like that. So now, if it works when we click that button, okay, so we got some state working. This will just take a second. Let's make this a little bit more interesting. We'll do a default parameter. How can I remove the last element? There's probably tons of ways to do it in JavaScript. Can't really say I'm much of a JavaScript developer though. What length? -1. Did that work? So now we've got 2 buttons. Sweet, that's working. This is sort of driving me nuts, so let's spread these buttons out a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we'd want to, instead of getting hard coding this value, traditionally we'd want to get the value from our web API, right? So we got jQuery. It's already in scope. Should work out great for us here. What's our? Let's grab our URL API / values. Yeah, it's got to be plural. Results. See about this callback. So if results not undefined, let's populate it with it, shall we? Something like that. Value 1 and value 2. So these change. So it's because it's getting it from our controller here. So if we said value 3, value 4, or you know what? Let's just change these to single digits, like we had it before, just so to not mess up our add and remove. There we go. That works out pretty good, right? So we're getting the data. You know what's weird is we didn't have to do any cores related stuff on here to enable cores. I've had problems with that in the past. You can just use this enable cores attribute. If you just do it like this, it's using the default policy if you've got it set up. If you do it like this, it's, you know, whatever your policy name is. And to set up the cores, you do that right in here. So So I think services dot add cores. Yeah, and then this takes in a function options dot. Let's go look at okay, I had this pulled up right here. Yeah, add cores. You know, so it's a setup sort of like this, where you can just. This is a default policy, so in your controller, if you just specified it like so and didn't specify a policy name, then it'll execute this one. And by this code, it's saying only these origins would work with that, right? So it's with origins. I think there's a why am I not getting the telesense on this? Allow any header, allow any method. Wonder if there's a allow any origin. There we go. So this default one will kind of do it all right for us, but this is a named one if you wish to, if you have a bunch of different policies that you wanted to set up to do different things. So we build it there. You could come down here and say app.add cores, and you could even specify what policy to use, and that would apply it to every controller in the throughout the whole site. It's sort of applying it globally. So to recap, we've already got we got a web API going on. We've got Typescript set up, and we've got it using React. I'll bet not in a very friendly way, but it's using it. So the next thing that I'd want to show is, I guess, how to use a database in the back and an entity model. I tend to use SQLite a lot. So I'll display how to set up entity framework in a model using SQLite and dependency injection, so that you can make these controllers a little bit more rich in what they do, and persist all that on your server in a super fast database, SQLite database. So that's it for this video. After that, the next video, I'll make one more video of changing this default setup here with TypeScript and adding Webpack to the mix. And maybe in SAS, we'll add SAS to the mix, some gulp tasks to kind of control everything for us. We want to be able to build, develop, and see it, you know, instantly over here, and not have to constantly execute all these different tasks. So we get some watch stuff going on, Webpack watch, to do all that Webpack stuff, and that'll be generating these HTML files for us according to our main components, React components. Entry points is what I guess React would call it. And also that'll allow us to have in our source file any sort of structure, folders containing TypeScript files everywhere, and we'll be able to just import things from those files a lot easier than this manual way of just running this very simple TypeScript config will allow. So I found that once you get all that stuff set up, it takes a lot more to set it up, but once it's set up, you can really develop your apps really quickly, especially these little web apps. You know, you could build 3 or 4 complete web app pages, you know, in a day, complete with all of it, full stack, you know, all through its setting it up in the database and building the services for it and building all the UI. So So stay tuned.